One of the first times that I was there, I stayed in a hotel that was far fancier than I tend to stay in now because I was a tourist at first. And I remember the weirdness of the place was kind of evidenced in the fact that this landlocked country, this fancy little hotel had little giveaways that they gave to their guests. One was a glasses case, it was a needle-pointed glasses case with the name of the hotel misspelled. Can you imagine laboriously needle-pointing that glasses case and getting the spelling wrong? But the other thing was this little sort of blue satin stuffed animal. It was stuffed with little beans or beads, and it was a starfish in a landlocked country. And I thought, this place is just so entrancingly weird. Eventually, I went to the capital city of Vientiane, and I visited a place that is sort of on the tourist circuit there, but it's called COPE. It's the National Orthopedic Center. And I learned why Laos is so extremely experienced in creating artificial limbs. And the reason is that so many people there lose their limbs when they walk over unexploded ordnance left over from our bombardment of Laos during the Vietnam War, 50 years ago now. During that war, the United States, we had a treaty commitment not to have any troops in Laos, which we mostly honored. But we also were very concerned to do everything we could to inhibit the Pathet Lao, the Lao communist insurgency, which was mostly in the north of the country, sort of up in the mountains in the Broccoli Head, from taking over the government, which in due course they did. We were also very concerned to impede traffic along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, through which North Vietnam infiltrated supplies to their cadres in South Vietnam. That trail ran along the Annamite Mountains, which is the border between Laos and Vietnam, mostly on the Laotian side. Since we couldn't have troops there, what we did was we bombed Laos. We bombed Laos. The calculus is that it was the equivalent of a bombing raid every 8 minutes, 24 hours a day for 10 years. Unbelievable numbers of bombs. Most of them were cluster bombs. Cluster bombs, I learned so much that I didn't really want to know. But if you don't know what a cluster bomb is, it is a munition about the size of a baseball. They are packed in long shell casings about the length of one of these front benches here, or a little longer. Hundreds and hundreds of them in one shell casing. They're dropped from a bomber jet at high altitude. And as the shell casing falls towards the earth, it bursts open, and these hundreds of submunitions fall to the ground. And each one of them has an explosive charge and a whole bunch of shrapnel embedded in it. The idea is that they will fall over a large area and kill everybody there, which they did, except that they had a 30% failure rate. So, during that time, the United States dropped, and these numbers are verifiable, and some numbers are estimates, some numbers are known from records. We know that the United States dropped 270 million cluster bombs, cluster munitions on Laos. We know that the failure rate was 30%, which means that we know that there are still 80 million of them there. Can you imagine 80 million? That number is too big for me to even conceptualize. The citizenry, the size of Laos in terms of citizens is about the same as New York City. So imagine the population of New York City spread over an area maybe twice as big as Maine, with 80 million cluster bombs, clustered in places where people are, because of course we weren't bombing the empty mountains, we were bombing the trail, and we were bombing villages and towns. I visited a mine removal team. Mine isn't really quite the right word, a munitions removal team in rural Laos. And I learned what they do to find and clear up these bombs. First of all, it will take until the end of time. Jesus will come back sooner than they will find the last cluster munition. But they can go and look for munitions that are present and explosive and dangerous in places that people want to be. And to do that, they have teams of about 11 or 12 people, consisting of about 10 really well-trained munitions detection and demolition experts, and then a team leader and a deputy team leader and a medic and a driver, and some people double task. Excuse me. So about a dozen people, and they go out, and first of all, they interview people who were there when the bombs fell. That obviously has to happen pretty quickly at this point, given the age of villagers in Laos who were present during the bombing of the Vietnam War 50 years ago. But they try to learn where bombs were dropped. And then they go and they take a large metal detector. Imagine something about the size of a twin mattress, PVC tubes in a rectangle the size of a twin mattress, one person on either end of the device with earphones on, and they walk slowly over the schoolyard or the hospital courtyard or the rice paddy, and they listen for a beep in their ears that tells them that this machine has detected metal in the soil. They then go back with finer, more precise metal detectors, localize exactly where the metal is, put a little flag in the soil, and then they go and they dig it up using wooden tools because they are less reactive than metal tools, being very, very careful. They excavate, and what they normally find is this little baseball-sized, they call them bombies, this little baseball-sized bombie. And when they find one, they put a little charge of plastic explosive on it. I've learned what C4 looks like. So many things to learn. A little charge of C4, they mold it onto the bombie, and they run 300 yards of wire, because that's how much you need to have to be safe. They unspool 300 yards of wire. They press a button, and there's an earth-shattering explosion. Each one of these things is so unbelievably powerful. And they're everywhere. They are in schoolyards. They are in hospital courtyards. They are mostly worked into the soil at this point, but sometimes, of course, if a bamboo shoot, you know how quickly bamboo grows, right? So bamboo grows up and it lifts the bombie up, and they're painted bright yellow, many of them. And children play with them, and there's a new crop of 5-year-olds every single year. And so they go out and they try to teach the children about what the bombs are and how they're dangerous. There's a heartbreaking ITV story that I have on my website. I'll give you the address, where a team from Mines Advisory Group, they're one of the big international groups that does this bomb clearance. Mines Advisory Group sent a team out to educate children about the dangers and what to look for, and they had a chart of all the different kinds of cluster munitions that children might come across. And one of the Mines Advisory Group instructors said to the gathered children in this little dirt Laotian schoolyard, "Have any of you ever seen any of these?" All the children raised their hands. And the teacher said, "Where?" And one of the children said, "There." In the schoolyard, on the surface, just sitting there. They are everywhere. And the mission is not to clean up all of them, as I said. That can't be done, I don't think. The mission is to clean up one village at a time, one schoolyard at a time, one hospital courtyard at a time. Darabie and I, my wife and I, decided that we would put a great deal of my time and life is going to be dedicated to this work. And we put a chunk of our own resources into it because we wanted to be able to fund a team doing this work that wouldn't have been able to exist otherwise. So we've sponsored a team for this year. Now we're starting to try to raise money so that we can keep it going after this year, because we don't have the resources to do it forever without help. But for this year, Mine Action Team number 53 is working in rural Khamwan province, which is one of the poorest provinces of Laos, over near the Annamite Mountains. Earlier this summer, they found buried alongside a roadway. The roads in Laos are mostly kind of red mud dirt tracks. It's a really poor country. So there was a road that ran through a village, and the village had decided that the time had come to put gravel on the road at long last, so maybe that they could use it in the wintertime as well when there's rain. Winter in Laos is a relative term. It's never cold except at high altitudes, but it is often wet. And they decided to gravel this road, and they started looking at the ditches on the side of the road because they were going to gravel and sort of slightly improve the road, and there was a 750-pound bomb right there, which, had they passed over it with a gravel truck, would have destroyed the entire village and killed everybody in it. So they excavated this bomb, they brought it to a safe place, They use their very careful training to open it, to defuse it, to make it safe. And I've never seen such happy smiles on the face of people. They were so triumphant. But it's a slog. The work is hard. The conditions are hard. They're often working in very remote areas. People live in very remote areas. People in Laos forage for a good deal of their food. They go into the forests and they look for mushrooms. So people are all over, and they try to make these areas safe. This past winter, as I said, I had a sabbatical. I had 4 months away, and my goal was to learn some spoken Lao so that I could communicate with members of this team in their language and not expect them to speak in mine, which didn't feel appropriate to me. I couldn't get into Laos because they still had corona restrictions in place. Nobody could come or go. They were locked down as tightly as China until the day they decided to stop all of it, which was 3 days after my sabbatical ended. So I was in northern Thailand on the Thai side of the Mekong River. I could hear and smell Laos from across the river, but I couldn't get to it without getting thrown in jail, so I didn't. But I did learn a lot of Lao because in that part of China, of Thailand, they speak, the spoken dialect is Isan, which is the same as Lao, more or less. And I work with a teacher from Vientiane across the river. I still meet with her twice a week, so Tony Global Pasaladai, Le Koi Si Pai Yu Batet Lao, Duan Yung, which means now I speak a little bit of Lao, and I'm going to go to Laos in January, and I'll get to meet this team, and I'll get to see the work that they're doing, and I'll get to come and tell you their stories far better than I can right now. Sometimes people ask me, if it's going to take until the end of time to get all the bombs, why bother? And I was thinking to myself, do you all know this cliched story that people tell about the boy at the beach throwing starfish back in the water? Well, if you don't know it, a boy is on a beach, the tide has gone out, and somehow when the tide was high, the beach was covered with starfish. And this boy is just walking along the beach, picking up one after another, and throwing them back into the sea. And some well-meaning adult comes up to the boy and says, "There's millions of these. You're never going to get them all back in the ocean. Why bother?" And the boy looks at him and he says, "Well, because it matters to this one." I was here this morning, and for some reason that starfish, that blue satin starfish that I was given all those years ago on my first trip to Laos, and I didn't understand, for some reason I thought of that this morning, and I thought, holy cow, that's why that starfish was on that hotel shelf all those years ago. We're throwing starfish back in the sea, one little village at a time. We're cleaning up an explosive remnant of a long ago war that Laos wasn't even a part of, and that the people being affected now weren't even born, by and large, at the time of. For me, it's exciting work. And it's exciting work in a place that is so beautiful and so shadowed. And if we can make the shadows a little bit less dark and the beauty a little bit brighter, I think that's helping to build the kingdom of God. So that's what I'm up to. That's what we're doing in Laos. We want to continue funding Mine Action Team number 53. We would love one day to be able to add team number 54, but that's a distant goal. And thank you for inviting me to come and tell you about this. Let's all go outside and have some cookies and lemonade. And one of the things that I'm learning to do right now, in addition to speak Lao, is to get past my reticence to ask people for things. And so I'm still not going to ask you in like an arm-twisting or extorting kind of way, because I just can't bring myself to do that. But I will have forms that will give you both the website address that will link you to my website if you want to learn more, including to this news video that I mentioned. It's posted on there. And if you are moved to help support this work, you will be like the first people other than me who are, and I will take that as a huge affirmation. And there it is. I'm learning to ask. So thank you for inviting me this morning. Thank you for letting me tell you about this. If you choose to come alongside and help, I'll keep you posted. Thank you. See you outside in a minute.